Hey everyone, welcome back. We're diving headfirst into today, March 14th, 2025.
Oh, yeah.
Because honestly, the global markets are looking a little
uh
like they're having a bit of a meltdown.
Yeah, a little bit of an identity crisis going on.
Exactly. And we got some awesome data,
Mm-hmm.
some expert analysis all lined up.
Absolutely.
So let's try to unpack what is making things so volatile right now.
It is super fascinating because
Yeah,
we've got all these different things happening at once,
totally.
and it's creating this perfect storm of uncertainty.
Okay, so let's start with what went down in the U.S. yesterday.
Yeah.
We saw some huge drops.
Mm-hmm.
S&P 500 down 1.4%.
Right.
Dow Jones down 1.3%.
Yep.
And the Nasdaq took a real hit,
Oh, yeah.
down a full 2%.
That's the one that stands out to me.
Yeah.
You know, when the S&P 500 dips into what they call correction territory, that's like a psychological tripwire for investors.
Really?
Because it means it's down 10% from its peak.
Oh, wow.
So people start getting a little skittish.
Like a herd mentality almost.
Exactly. It can trigger all sorts of reactions,
Yeah.
Sometimes it leads to more conservative strategies, which makes sense.
Sure.
But sometimes it even, spirals into fear-driven selling.
Oh, wow. That's
And, if you think back to the dot-com bubble bursting back in the early 2000s,
Oh, right. Yeah.
when the Nasdaq hit that correction zone,
Yeah.
it set off this chain reaction and
Right.
eventually, led to a pretty significant downturn.
So are we saying that?
It's gonna happen.
I'm not saying that's what's happening now,
Okay.
but it shows how powerful that psychology can be.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of things that make investors nervous,
Yeah?
trade tensions.
Always a fun topic.
U.S. is slapping new tariffs on European wine and spirits.
I
Is
know.
this like the beginning of a full-blown trade war?
Well, it's definitely not a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
And I mean, history tells us pretty clearly that trade wars,
Yeah.
they rarely end well for anyone involved.
All right. They mess up global supply chains,
Mm-hmm.
increase costs for companies,
Right.
and can actually stifle economic growth.
It just makes everything so unpredictable.
Exactly. Uncertainty is like kryptonite for investors.
It makes that producer price index holding steady in February even more confusing.
I know, right?
So no inflation.
Yeah.
Isn't that supposed to be good?
Well, on the surface, yeah.
Yeah.
But a flat PPI, it's not always so straightforward.
Oh, really?
It could mean that inflation is calming down,
Right.
but it can also mean that the economy is slowing down.
Which is
And
not good.
not great news for investors.
So it's kind of a wait and see situation.
Yeah, exactly. It's just one piece of the puzzle.
And sometimes these puzzle pieces don't really fit together.
Totally.
Like we're talking about potential economic slowdowns.
Uh-huh.
And then Adobe drops this bombshell,
Oh, yeah.
a disappointing revenue outlook,
Yeah.
and their stock tanks almost 14%.
I saw that, yeah.
What's going on there?
Adobe's case is interesting because it could be like a canary in a coal mine,
What do you mean?
like a sign of a bigger trend in the whole tech sector,
Oh, interesting.
especially with the Nasdaq down so much.
Right.
The Nasdaq's super heavy on tech companies.
Totally.
So when a big player like Adobe starts showing weakness,
Uh-huh.
it casts this shadow over the entire sector.
Oh, wow.
And that just adds fuel to the uncertainty fire.
That reminds me of this one time back when
Yeah.
host speaker shares relevant personal anecdote lasting less than 30 seconds about tech sector volatility. Okay.
Yeah.
But before we go full doomsday preppers,
Right.
there are a few silver linings.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
U.S. stock futures are hinting at a rebound today.
That's good news.
They are.
It looks like that stopgap funding bill is going to pass,
Okay.
the one to prevent a U.S. government shutdown.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And that seems to be giving investors a little breathing room.
Like a sigh of relief.
Totally. It's a sign that things aren't completely falling apart.
Okay. And then there's gold. Always an interesting one to watch.
For sure.
It just hit a record high.
I know, it's crazy.
Almost $3,000 an ounce.
Wild.
Seems like everyone's rushing to buy it.
Well, it's that classic flight to safety phenomenon.
It's that.
It's when things are uncertain,
Mm-hmm.
investors get nervous. They want to protect their money.
Sure.
So they flock to assets that feel safe and stable.
Like gold.
Exactly. Gold's like the OG safe haven asset.
So it's seen as something that's going to hold its value,
Right.
even when everything else is going haywire.
Exactly. It's like the financial equivalent of a security blanket.
Okay. So the U.S. is a little chaotic right now.
A little bit. Yeah.
What's the global picture looking like?
It's a mixed bag, to be honest.
Uh-huh.
Some Asian markets had a bit of a roller coaster day.
Right.
But European markets are expected to open higher,
Oh, interesting.
maybe because of those positive U.S. futures we talked about.
Okay.
It really goes to show how interconnected global finance is these days. You know what happens in one part of the world?
Yeah,
It has ripple effects everywhere.
totally.
And, even something like Adobe's performance,
Mm-hmm.
that could impact tech companies over in Europe and Asia.
Yeah, because they're all kind of...
Because it's all one big global ecosystem now.
So it's a lot of wait and see.
Yeah, it feels like we're in a holding pattern, just
Mhm.
waiting to see how all these different factors play out.
Trade tensions, economic indicators.
Company news. It's
It's a lot to keep track of.
a lot.
It really raises a big question for me.
What's that?
How can everyday investors
Yeah,
navigate all this craziness?
right.
I mean, it's more important than ever to stay informed,
Absolutely.
do your homework,
Yeah,
and be really honest with yourself about your risk tolerance.
that's good advice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Diversifying your portfolio can help a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and staying focused on your long-term goals.
That's so important.
Tuning out some of that short-term noise.
Because otherwise you just get
Totally swept up in it.
You can't let the daily ups and downs derail your big picture plan.
That's a great point.
And remember,
yeah.
you don't have to figure this all out on your own.
Yeah.
There are people who can help,
Oh, yeah.
like financial advisors.
Totally.
They can give you personalized advice
Yeah.
and help you make a plan that's right for you.
That's great advice.
Oh,
All right. Well, that's our deep dive into the market mayhem of March 14, 2025.
a lot going on.
It is. So what are you thinking? What stands out to you as the biggest driver of all this uncertainty?
Well,